And welcome everyone to our Meet the Men's Basketball Selection Committee series. I'm Andy Katz for the NCAA and March Madness. Pleased to be joined by North Carolina Athletic Director Bubba Cunningham and the chair of the 2025 Men's Basketball Selection Committee. Bubba, I think back to maybe Tulsa. I mean, it's been a long time that our paths have crossed over the last 30 years. When you think back to your journey, not just as an athletic director, but being in the position as being chair of one of the most powerful committees that the NCAA has, how do you look at how that zigzagging path got you to this point?
Boy, thanks, Andy. And it's great to be on with you. And the tournament is it's so special. My path in college athletics started many, many years ago when Digger Phelps was the basketball coach at Notre Dame. And then John McLeod came, and then Matt Doherty came, Mike Bray came, and then I ended up going to Ball State, and I was with Tim Buckley, and then over to Tulsa with Doug Wojcik, and now here at Carolina with Coach Williams, and now with Hubert Davis. And it's been phenomenal. And having been in so many different leagues, we were an independent first with Digger. Then we were in the Midwestern Collegiate Conference. We were in what Digger called the Vatican League. Then we were in the Big East. And so then I was at, the Mid-American Conference, Conference USA, and now the ACC. So I feel like I have seen the tournament from a lot of different angles, a lot of different perspectives. And the thing I can say about it is it's the pinnacle of college basketball. And it's not just a singular event. I mean, it's a month-long celebration of what's great about college sports, and in particular, college basketball.
And I think people forget sometimes that everyone on the committee has a pretty important day job. Obviously, you had to deal with, a massive change in football, going out and hire, and there's still a lot to do with that and helping Bill Belichick with his staff. So how do you balance the enormity of the men's basketball selection committee job and your day job, which takes up every hour of the day, plus a family life?
Well, you understand that, any organization, large organizations like Carolina, you have an incredible staff. And I think you specifically know about our basketball staff between Steve Kirshner, who's our sports information director, Clint Waltney, who does all the day-to-day operations, and Eric Hoots, who is our actually basketball operations manager. Those three are really, really helpful in my ability to be able to continue to manage the department and stay completely plugged in with basketball. And I use them a lot. I also have a couple of interns that are working in our sports administration program that are totally dedicated to the tournament. So whether it's getting prepared for the meetings that happen throughout the year, or it's talking about different players, different conferences, different teams, getting us connected with Synergy, taking a look at all the analytics, they're all breaking it down. And we're having regular meetings to go through all of those things to make sure that we're prepared and have the best information available at the end of the season to make some recommendations on who's in the tournament.
I love the point that you just brought up about interns, because there are only so many hours of the day. You can't watch everything. I'm curious, because I know how I have to try to navigate this. On a daily basis, how often are you sort of prepped or given, okay, here's what happened the day before, here are some results to pay attention to, all across the country?
It's a daily update, but I have to admit, there's some days that you're more dialed in than others based on what you have going on. But we set aside a couple hours once a week to make sure that we go more in depth. So whether it's, hey, this happened, and let's go back and actually watch some of the tape. So we have Synergy accounts, so we can go back and Synergy does a fabulous job for us. So you can get individual plays, you can get the entire game, you can get the last couple of minutes. And I also think, hearing the broadcast is also helpful as well. So, there's so many different data points, but I still think watching games, understanding what coaches think, how players play, I think is really the most important thing at the end when you're trying to evaluate schools from all over the country. They're going to play different conference schedules, different non-conference schedules, and then you're trying to get some commonality to say, hey, this is a fair representation of the best teams in the country, and how do we put them together for an incredible tournament?
And we were both in Maui, and obviously there were a number of teams that more than likely will be in the field. How much did that help to literally just see a cross section of teams from across the country.
I think it's invaluable, and I'm glad you raised it. So, what I've been really intentional in doing the last 4 years is when we play in MTEs to go to other games and see the size, the athleticism, the coaching, everything associated with the various programs. I think it really helps. You can watch it on television, you can watch it on Synergy, but I believe live court level or in the stands is really the best way to really understand the quality of these teams. And I'll tell you, there are some great teams out there. And one of the other things I find interesting is we've all talked about the portal and NIL and rev share and all this is watching kids play 1 year on one team and next year on another team and go, wait a minute, boy, that kid's really familiar. Oh yeah, that's because he was there last year. And we just saw that against Florida. We had Florida, we had half of the FAU team between the Florida and Michigan. We had half the team I was watching for a second time on two different squads.
So I love that you brought that up because the beauty of North Carolina is even when they've been in these, single game events, there are two other teams that they're not playing. And I have literally seen you at the other game, watching, not just because, Carolina, was playing UCLA, but there was an Ohio State Kentucky game where when Carolina, and I know there was different nights, but when they play Florida in the same city, you've got Florida, you had Oklahoma and Michigan. So that's also great to take advantage of that. And to that point, in a larger scale, Bubba, I don't have the data to back this up. It just feels like in the first 2 months of this season, we've seen more coaches get the message to go out and play people on the road, to challenge themselves in these single day neutral site games, obviously the MTEs and the home and homes. I mean, obviously you guys did this as well with Kansas, but it feels like coaches got the message, go out and play people on home and homes or in a neutral site in the non-conference. So we have those data points when we get to March.
I agree. And I think that's really good for college basketball. I think it's great, for us to go out and play at Kansas in a home and home situation. And I see more teams doing that. The MTEs are great because the MTEs have been really good over a long period of time, particularly for, I hate to say mid-major, but mid-majors that don't get home games that schools like Carolina can get. We can get home and homes basically anytime we want. And heck, when I was at Ball State and I was at Tulsa, we couldn't get a home and home to save our life. And in fact, I got frustrated one year when I was at Tulsa and when one of the, not you, Andy, but another person in the media said, well, you've got to play people. I wrote to every single at-large team in the tournament that year and asked them to play us home and home. I got one response. And it was from Louisville that said, we won't play you home and home, but you can come here and play us there. And so it's not quite as easy to schedule as you might think when you're at some of those other ones. So the MTEs have been very good for them, and I think it gives them great exposure. But I do think for the elite teams and the teams that want to be seated high, play a great non-conference schedule, and I think that will help. Now, the challenge that we're in this year, we played such a good non-conference schedule that you've got to win some of those games. You can't just play them, you got to win them. So there is a balance. I understand why coaches get tentative about, hey, I don't want to go too far because if I can't win those games, that's going to hurt me from getting in the tournament. And that's true. So while it's good to do it, it's great for the game, you do have to win them if you play them.
Last two things, Bubba, and I just want to remind people of this because people have short memories. Sorry out there, but it's true. When we get into conference play, and there was all this chirping about, obviously the teams got in the college football playoff, that it's not the number of wins you get in your league. It's always who did you beat to get to that number. So if you got 10 wins, 9 wins, 11 wins, but 80 or 90% of those wins came from the bottom of teams that aren't going to be in the field, that's a problem. So let me deal with that first. How do you look at when a coach says, oh, I won 10 or 11 games in, the Power 4 league. Why aren't I in? Well, who did you beat? How do you look at that?
You're right. And you raised a very interesting question because what we're experiencing now is the conference expansion. Now, ACC has been a big league for a long time, but we added 3 most recently. So now we're sitting there at 18. So you've got 18, 16, 14. Traditionally, you had 8, 9, 10, 11 teams. So if you'd play a double round robin, you really had a good idea who are the best teams in your league. With these big leagues and you're playing an unbalanced schedule, it does make a difference who you play. The strength of the schedule within your league matters. And so we do look at all of that. There's not an exact science to it either. So we might say, hey, we think this school did really well against their conference because of the unbalanced schedule. We might have a different opinion in a different league, and that's when, from the time we make the selections on Sunday till we tip it off on Tuesday, everybody's complaining that we got it wrong. But there's going to be human judgment based on this. And the other thing that's changed, in addition to the expansion of the conference size, the expansion of the committee. So instead of having 10 opinions, we have 12. And so now we're going to have to factor in everybody's view and say collectively, we think this is the best group for this tournament this year.
And lastly, Bubba, um, there's no secret the SEC had a great first 2 months of the season. And yet every year, oh, they can't take, 14 from League X or whatever. The reality is every team is judged differently. And if we end up with that many that deserve it, then that's how many would get in. How often do you have to sort of remind everyone that it doesn't matter league affiliation? If that many teams are deserving, by the time we get there, then that's how many teams would potentially get in. And if some other massive league only deserves a few, then that's what happens in this particular year. It ends up being cyclical. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right. Dan Gavitt and Joanne Scott do such a masterful job, and Dave Warlick, of reminding the committee what are the policies, what are the procedures that we follow to ensure that we get the best teams in. And none of that has to do with what conference you're in. It's about who are the best teams and how do you get the best teams in the field. And so we don't do it, and then we do it after the fact and say, oh my gosh, we had this many teams from that league or that league, or somebody on Twitter says, hey, this is what happened. But we don't look at that as we're making some decisions and recommendations as we go. But this will be a very interesting year to see it, because you're right. A lot of leagues have had wonderful non-conference schedules, and they're going to be competitive leagues throughout the season.
Well, I can't wait. It's going to be a great couple of months. Have a great holiday. And look, we just can't wait to keep going because it's been a great season so far.
Yeah, it has been. Thanks for all the coverage, Andy. And we're looking forward to a great tournament come March and April.